All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're talking about what is, no joke, the single most important chemical reaction on our planet: photosynthesis. I mean, this is the process that literally powers almost all life on Earth, and we're going to break down exactly how this incredible engine of life actually works. Okay, so let's really let that sink in. This isn't just some biological process, it is the process. Seriously, every single breath you take, every bite of food you eat, you can trace it all back to this one amazing transformation of sunlight into life itself. So here's what we've got on tap. First, we'll see why it's called the engine of life. Then, we'll look at the ultimate recipe for making it happen. After that, we'll go inside the tiny green factory where it all goes down, see how scientists actually proved it works, and wrap up by looking at what all this means for our future. Ready? Let's do this. First up, the engine of life. I mean, that's a pretty big title, right? So why do we call it that? Well, to really get it, let's just break down the name itself, and you'll see why this one process is so critical for every single one of us. The name basically gives the whole game away. It comes from two Greek words: phos, which means light, and synthesis, which means to combine or put together. So when you boil it all down, photosynthesis just means making stuff using light. It's such a simple name for a truly elegant process. So why is this one thing such a huge deal? Well, it boils down to two massive, and I mean massive, reasons. First, it's our planet's oxygen factory. Without photosynthesis, we literally couldn't breathe. And second is the ultimate food producer. Plants make their own food, and then everything else, including us, either eats the plants or eats something that ate the plants. It's the foundation of pretty much everything. All right, moving on. Let's think about this whole thing like it's the ultimate recipe, a recipe that cooks up the two things all life needs to survive: food to eat and oxygen to breathe. And what's amazing is just how basic the ingredients are. I mean, think about it. Plants just grab carbon dioxide right out of the air, pull up some water from the soil, and then use their secret ingredient, this green stuff called chlorophyll, to soak up energy from the sun. That's it. And here it is, the entire process laid out in one master recipe. You take 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water, you add a little bit of light energy to get it going, and what do you get? 1 molecule of glucose, that's the sugar, the plant's food, and 6 molecules of oxygen, which is just a wonderful little byproduct for the rest of us. So we've got the recipe, but where does all the magic happen? Well, for that, we have to go deep inside the plant cell, into this tiny little green factory called the chloroplast. We're going to see the two-stage assembly line that makes it all work. You see, the whole operation is split into two main phases. You've got the light-dependent reactions, which, no surprise, need sunlight, and right after that you have the light-independent reactions, also called the Calvin cycle. As you can see here, they happen in different parts of the factory, and they use completely different ingredients to make totally different things. Okay, so let's break down stage one. Sunlight zaps the chlorophyll and gets it all energized. This energy is then used for something called photolysis, which is just a fancy word for splitting with light, where water molecules get ripped apart. And this is the exact moment oxygen gets released. The reaction also creates these two super important energy molecules, ATP and NADPH. Think of them like tiny, fully charged batteries, ready to power the next stage. Now for stage two, the Calvin cycle. This all goes down in the fluid-filled part of the chloroplast. And this is where those charged-up little batteries, the ATP and NADPH, come in and deliver their energy. All that power is then used to grab carbon dioxide from the air and build it into glucose. So to put it simply, this is the part of the assembly line where the actual food gets made. Now, this all sounds pretty good, but how do we know it's true? I mean, really know? Well, let's take a look at some really brilliant classic experiments that proved exactly which ingredients are absolutely non-negotiable for this whole process. So, first question for the scientists. How can we be 100% sure that the green stuff, the chlorophyll, is actually doing the work? How do we prove it's necessary? The trick here is to use a variegated leaf. One of those leaves with both green and white patches. First, you stick the plant in a dark closet for a bit to make sure it uses up any stored food. Then you put it out in the sun. When you test that leaf with iodine, which turns dark blue-black if starch is there, only the green parts change color. The white parts? Nothing. Case closed. No chlorophyll, no food. Okay, next challenge. The name is photosynthesis, right? So it's gotta need right. But how do you prove it? How do you show that light is an absolute must-have? This one is just so simple and so genius. You take a normal leaf, cover just a little strip of it with black paper, and then you put the plant in the sun. Later, you do that same iodine test, and the result is crystal clear. The part that was in the sun turns blue-black. The part that was covered, it stays brown. It's just definitive proof. No light, no starch. And for our final test, we know plants are breathing in carbon dioxide, but how do we prove that they absolutely cannot do photosynthesis without it? For this one, scientists got really clever. They took a leaf and sealed half of it inside a flask that had potassium hydroxide in it. That's a chemical that's really good at sucking all the CO2 out of the air. After a few hours in the sun, the results were just undeniable. The half of the leaf outside in the fresh air made starch, but the half trapped inside without any CO2? Nothing. So we've got a handle on how it all works. For our final section, let's talk about what controls the speed of this engine of life. Because understanding the things that can speed it up or slow it down, well, that's incredibly important for everything from farming to climate change and our future. First up, let's talk about light. As you'd expect, the brighter the light, the faster photosynthesis goes, but only up to a point. Eventually, the plant's machinery gets maxed out and the rate just flattens out. At that point, adding more light doesn't do a thing because something else has become the bottleneck. Temperature is another huge one. It turns out there's a Goldilocks zone for most plants, right around 35 degrees Celsius. In fact, the reaction rate pretty much doubles for every 10-degree jump up to that sweet spot. But if it gets too hot, the little enzymes that run the whole factory start to fall apart, and everything just grinds to a halt. And of course, there are a few other things that can put the brakes on. Just like with light, more CO2 is better, but again, only up to a certain point. A lack of water is a really big problem because the plant will close up those tiny pores on its leaves to save water, but that also cuts off its CO2 supply. And things like pollution can literally clog those pores, effectively suffocating the plant. So just think about this for a second. For billions of years, plants have been perfecting the art of turning sunlight into fuel with incredible efficiency. They basically solved the clean energy crisis before we were even around to have one. So as we face our own challenges with energy and climate, maybe the real question isn't just how they do it, but what can we learn from them? What's our next move?